Okay, I thought I would review some packaging with you and just look at some interesting sort of takes. So we were talking about um, sort of Greek influenced design last week. So this is a really nice packaging that sort of combines sort of three different things. So folk art, definitely. So when you look at the eyes in the shape of the fish on this packaging, then obviously the Greek influence in the patterning, but not on all the patterning, and then hand rendering, which sort of gives it takes that sort of Greek influence and even the folk art influence, and it gives it a bit of a modern feel to it, along with some interesting sort of geometric patterning. So I wanted to show you these ones because this is really a product line that usually is not too concerned about design in general. Vitamins and health products don't tend to really have understated design elements, and so this is a really nice example of just some fun typographic sort of approaches with some really sort of fresh colors. The other thing to really have a look at on this one is how using a very simple word mark. So joy leaf, the O looks obviously like a leaf. The nice thing about that is it doesn't pollute the package with another sort of graphic or another color. It doesn't demand your attention, and it doesn't compete with nail, skin, or hair. So that's a nice level of logo that works pretty nicely. So this is a great example of a couple things. So when I was showing you design styles, when we look at the illustration on here, it's clearly kind of a woodcut type or etching style with by adding the color to it, it gives it a bit of a modern twist. But the other thing that really works on here is look at the sort of contemporary approach to the design of the package versus the illustration. So lots of white space, sort of minimal colors. Really, it's kind of black and white. But look at the beautiful sort of hit of color along the side, and look at how the sort of softness of the heavy sans serif versus just the hit of orange on the carrot as well. Again, look at the simple sort of logo at the top, stable field. So again, another example of a logo that doesn't pollute the package. This is an example of some cider packaging that really sort of plays on that approach of using a sense of humor to create your packaging. So hometown homicider, and it's cider. So having the sort of A for the awestruck, but also the knife is a nice sort of logo play. Now, I want to show you this one just because of two things. So when you have an illustration, that is pretty interesting like this, and you use it in such a minimal way, it really creates an interesting visual for the packaging. So sort of starting with the bear itself as a theme, and then notice the kind of bold topography. It's kind of modern. It's a little bit modern and it's a little bit vintage at the same time. And then look at the way it's sort of carried out through the actual bottles. Now look at the white space created on the packaging here, where there's quite a bit of white area, minimal color, really just kind of black. And then as we go to the bottles, it continues that same sort of it continues to sort of use the lots of white space and a minimal approach. And then the simple sort of a combination between vintage and modern topography. But really nice job of coming up with one sort of central theme and then carrying it throughout the entire package. Now, I included this one just in case you wanted to add elements to your packaging that you couldn't figure out how to do in Dimension. So maybe you want to add a handle to your beer package, or have something protrude out. That's why it allows Dimensions allows you to save a PSD file. So something like this could easily be rendered by opening the file in Photoshop afterwards. Now I include this one because we did look at a category that I mentioned to you guys that was sort of icon based, and I thought this was a really nice example of creating a very sort of sophisticated but simple icon, using really nice light, using areas of light on the icon, and then creating a very simple color palette that works across 3 bottles, and then somewhat mix of modern and vintage topography, so that you can sort of see how it works really nicely with the carrier. And then some nice elements from the cover, from the label to the cap. Really sort of imaginative packaging to sort of present these cookies. I put this one in there just because it's a very kind of strange combination of coming up with a character, really kind of looking at you know, kind of vintage illustration, inspired vintage illustration. It's not really vintage, and then creating a package that seemingly is mixing different elements. So there's this large sort of cider written on the side of it that actually overlaps right onto the illustration. There's a hit of red up at the top. All of it is a little bit strange, but works quite nice when you look at the colors and balance of the package. Now, last year, one of my students for her beer project used a very different style beer bottle. And sometimes the shape of your package often has as much character as the labeling. So here's a very sort of a modern word mark, but then a very, very sort of vintage approach to the whiskey itself. Now, I included this one because it really is a good example of understanding that when you have elements, if you use them in the right way, it can create a really interesting design. So there is nothing remarkable about the flower that we see in this. There's nothing remarkable about the type, but when you sort of combine the balance, sort of the vintage approach to some of the smaller elements of type, the color, the balance, the sort of unusual stacking of the banners on top of each other, it ends up giving you quite an interesting and unique approach, even though there's not a single element on here that is all that remarkable. So this is really sort of the opposite of that, where if you have the ability to create sort of stunning visuals with pattern and interest, you sort of stay out of the way and create a package that features that. The type at the top still has sort of a vintage feel to it, but the actual coloring of the package has a really nice sort of modern take, where it feels like a large sort of label on a flat black package with a little bit of metallic. Now, I included these this packaging mock-up just to sort of show, you know, just by creating very kind of bold graphics without actually being able to do a really high-level illustration can still work. So, you know, very kind of modern geographic shapes, simple color palette, and then, you know, the one in the middle, very much sort of a vintage label, which is sort of counters the modern geometric approach. And sometimes a concept that's carried through can give you some pretty interesting visuals for your packaging. So a really nice example of sort of modern abstract illustration that's transparent and then very much kind of a modern heading with a bit of vintage text underneath it. And finally, just an example of some modern pattern, you know, that really is not all that amazing, but you know, when you use the surface of your packaging and understand that that if it balances, and if you have a design system and a color system, you can create pretty amazing stuff without having to be, you know, the world's best image maker.